Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Tonight, we're diving into something wild, messy, and honestly, way more intense than your average dating app drama. We're talking about love, or at least the medieval version of it in the Middle Ages. Picture this: no swiping, no ghosting, just plagues, dowries, and a whole lot of family negotiations. Finding the one back then wasn't about sparks flying. It was about land deals, livestock, and maybe a priest giving you the side eye. So, grab a snack, hit that like button if you're ready for a deep dive, and subscribe if you love these historical rabbit holes as much as I do. Drop a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I'm always amazed at how we're all connecting across the globe for this. All right, let's set the mood, dim those lights, maybe turn on a fan for that cozy vibe, and let's step into a world where romance was complicated. Imagine you're in a muddy medieval village, or maybe a drafty stone castle, and you're wondering how to catch someone's eye. You spot someone cute. Maybe they're rocking a sweet pair of hose, or carrying a basket of turnips like a pro. Your heart's doing a little flip. But hold up, this isn't a rom-com. There's no meet cute at the local tavern, or flirty banter over a loaf of bread. In the Middle Ages, dating as we know it, yeah, that's not a thing. Instead, your love life is basically a group project run by your parents, your lord, or maybe even the village priest. They're the ones deciding who you're marrying, when it's happening, and how many goats it's gonna cost. Love, that's a nice bonus, but it's not the main event. If you're a noble, your fate's been sealed since you were in diapers. Betrothals were locked in early think-toddler handshakes over land rights. You might not even meet your future spouse until the wedding day. And let me tell you, that's as awkward as it sounds. The whole setup is about alliances, titles, and merging estates, not whether you both vibe over lute music. If you're a peasant, it's a bit less formal, but don't get too excited. Your family's still calling the shots. Maybe they know a guy with a solid pig or a girl who's great at weaving. Next thing you know, you're courting, which mostly means your dads are haggling over a dowry while you stand there trying not to look bored. Now, don't get me wrong. Medieval folks felt butterflies, just like we do. They had crushes, sneaky glances, maybe even secret dreams about the baker's kid. But romance wasn't the priority. Survival was. Marriage was about securing your family's future, passing down land, and keeping the village from falling apart. Falling head over heels before the wedding. That's a risky move. Falling for someone outside your arranged match. Scandal City, unless you're in a poem, where tragic love is basically the whole plot. You're expected to keep those feelings on lock. So, you play by the rules. You wait. And you definitely don't make eyes at the miller's apprentice. Because in this world, love's for poets. But marriage is for parents, priests, and politics. Okay, so let's say you've got a crush. Maybe it's the way they sling a sack of grain, or how they dodge mud puddles with finesse. Your medieval heart's all aflutter. But before you start planning a moonlit stroll, you've got to ask yourself, What's my niche in this deal? And no, I'm not talking about your charming smile or your knack for storytelling. In the Middle Ages, romance comes with a balance sheet. If you're a guy, you better have something to offer land. Tools, a couple of sturdy cows, or at least a hut that doesn't leak. Love letters are cute, but nothing screams marriage material like a plow that works and a barn that's rat-free. If your older brothers already claimed the family's best sheep, you might be headed for a monastery. My friend, if you're a woman, your family's got to bring a dowry to the table. That could be coins, clothes, or maybe a flock of suspiciously plump chickens. Doesn't matter how clever you are or how well you sing without a dowry. You're probably stuck spinning wool solo for a while. Now, let's say you actually like someone. You lock eyes at the village well. There's a spark, and it feels like something out of a bard's tale. Too bad that spark's about as useful as a candle in a windstorm. Unless your families are on the same economic level. That crush is going nowhere. For nobles, it's even worse. Your marriage isn't just about you. It's a political chess move. You're not a person. You're a contract with legs. Peasants aren't much better off. You don't marry for love. You marry because your fields line up nicely with their pasture. Passion. Sure, dream about it. But you're settling for a shared well. Still, you're not giving up. Maybe you slip them a little gift. A wooden comb, a handful of wildflowers, or your least broken pottery shard. They smile, and your heart does a backflip. But here's the cold truth. In medieval dating, economics is the flirt, and love's just something you hope grows later, like a decent crop after a rainy spring. All right, let's switch gears. Say you're not a peasant worrying about pigs, or a noble tied up in treaties. You're a knight shiny armor, big horse, and some seriously questionable poetry skills. What's your love life like? Buckle up! Because we're entering the bizarre world of courtly love. This isn't dating. It's like a medieval soap opera mixed with performance art. Courtly love was this weird, noble hobby part flirtation. Part emotional torture and 100% impractical. As a knight, you pick a lady, usually someone who's already married. Because apparently that's the vibe, and you vow to worship her from a safe, respectful distance. No, you're not trying to actually be with her. That'd ruin the whole aesthetic. Instead, you're supposed to pine dramatically, like you're auditioning for a tragedy. You write poems about her radiant gaze, or how her smile wounds your soul. You wear her scarf into tournaments, sigh loudly at feasts, and maybe joust some random guy just for looking at her too long. The lady's job, act flattered but untouchable, like an iceberg with better manners. She might toss you a ribbon or write a cryptic note. But mostly she's just there, being unattainable. The whole thing's a game-high emotions. Zero actual contact. At best, you get a nod across the room, or her hand brushing your glove during a dance. Anything more. And it's not courtly love anymore. It's a scandal, or worse, a sin. This setup worked best when everyone knew it was mostly pretend. Courtly love was like medieval fan fiction. a way to channel big feelings without messing up the social order. It gave knights something to do between battles and let ladies feel admired without breaking any vows. Was it extra? Oh, absolutely. Was it more about poetry than actual romance? You bet. But in a world of rigid rules and constant war, courtly love was a way to dream big, feel deeply, and maybe write a few lines that didn't totally suck. So, you're head over heels, or at least as close as you can get, in a world where love's heavily supervised. You want to tell your crush how you feel. Maybe give them a flower or whisper something sweet, but good luck. Because medieval romance comes with a built-in audience. Chaperones are everywhere. Your mom, your aunt, the priest, maybe even a nosy neighbor with a grudge. If you're a young woman, you're never just going for a walk. You're escorted by someone who's judging your every move. Fetching water, someone's watching, sitting on a bench. Better hope your grandma's knitting nearby. If you're a guy trying to court someone, you've got to impress her entire family. The church and probably the village gossip squad. Show up with a gift. Her dad's sharpening a scythe. Try to chat. Her mom's pretending to churn butter while eavesdropping. The church is the worst of all. They've got sermons, manuals, even anti-flirting pamphlets warning about the dangers of unseemly glances. And don't even think about sending a love letter. Some monasteries would open your mail to check for sinful content. It's less dating, more spy thriller. Why all the surveillance? Simple. Protect virtue, preserve honor, and make sure nobody's sneaking off to hold hands without a contract. Love's not blind in the Middle Ages. It's got a chaperone, a rulebook, and a priest taking notes. So you keep your feelings quiet, play by the rules, and hope your crush notices that one time you didn't trip over a chicken. Because in this world, romance isn't just a feeling. It's a carefully monitored mission. That's it for tonight's dive into medieval dating. We've covered the basics: arranged marriages, dowries, courtly love, and the ever-present chaperones. But there's so much more to unpack. Secret love letters, festival flirtations, and the gritty reality of peasant courtship. Want me to keep going? Let me know in the comments, and I'll pick it up in the next chapter. For now, hit that like button if you enjoyed this. Subscribe if you're new, and tell me, what's the weirdest dating rule you've ever heard of? Drop it below, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace. Hey, what's good? Everyone, welcome back to the channel. We're picking up right where we left off, diving deeper into the wild, weird world of medieval dating. Last time, we talked about how love in the Middle Ages was less about heart eyes and more about land deals, dowries, and dodging chaperones. Tonight, we're going full rom-com. Well, as close as you can get when your crush comes with a contract and a priest. So, grab your favorite drink, hit that like button if you're ready for more, and subscribe if you're loving these historical deep dives. Drop a comment below. Tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is. It's always so cool to see who's joining us from all over the world. All right, Let's get cozy, maybe light a candle for that medieval vibe, and jump back into the chaos of finding love in a time of plagues and politics. Continue. So, you're in love, or at least you're feeling something that's making you stare longingly at the village well every time your crush walks by. Maybe they dropped a glove, and you're treating it like a holy relic. But expressing those feelings, that's where things get tricky. In the Middle Ages, you can't just slide into someone's DMs or send a flirty text. Instead, you've got tokens. Think of them as the 12th century version of a heart emoji, but way more stressful. Let's say you're a knight, pining for Lady Beatrice of who knows where. You can't exactly waltz up and ask her out. Her dad's got a crossbow, and her confessor's got a direct line to God. So, you send her something subtle, like a carved wooden spoon, or, if you're feeling extra, your best embroidered sleeve. Nothing says I'm into you like mailing someone a piece of your outfit. If you're on the receiving end, congrats. You're now the proud owner of a slightly sweaty glove and a whole lot of confusion. Is this a proposal, a friendly gesture, a weird laundry mix-up? Nobody knows. And that's the point. Tokens were cryptic by design. A lady might send a ribbon or a lock of hair. But it's not just sentimental, it's strategic. Give the wrong guy the wrong token, and suddenly you're betrothed to someone who smells like ale and bad decisions. For peasants, tokens were simpler, but just as meaningful. Maybe it's a whittled stick or a handkerchief you stitched while avoiding goats. It's not fancy, but it's got heart. The catch: tokens are a minefield. Hand one out to the wrong person, and the village gossip network lights up. Try to return one politely, and you're accidentally insulting someone's entire family tree. Still, these little gifts carried real weight. A spark of romance in a world that didn't leave much room for it. All right, let's say you've made it past the token stage. You're ready to take things to the next level. Maybe have an actual conversation, or, dare I say, make eye contact without a chaperone glaring. Good luck, because medieval dating is like trying to flirt in a room full of security cameras. If you're a young woman, you're never alone. Going to the market, your cousins tagging along, taking mental notes, chatting by the stream, your mom's casually washing clothes 10 feet away. And if you're a guy, you're navigating a gauntlet of her dad, her brothers, and the local priest, who's got a sermon ready about the dangers of wandering hands. The church was obsessed with keeping things pure. There were literal manuals warning against flirty glances, and some monks would straight up open your love letters to check for sin. It's not dating, it's a high-stakes stealth mission. Why all the oversight? Because in the Middle Ages, love wasn't just personal, it was a public safety issue. A bad match could tank your family's reputation, mess up land deals, or worse, make God mad. Chaperones weren't just nosy, they were there to protect virtue and keep the social order intact. So, you learn to play the game. You sneak a smile during a group dance, drop a cryptic compliment about their noble bearing, and pray nobody reports you to the bishop. It's exhausting, but when your crush smiles back, worth it. Now, let's talk about one of the few times you could actually let loose medieval festivals. Picture a harvest fair or a Saint's Day celebration. Music's playing, there's ale flowing, and someone's wearing a flower crown with way too much confidence. For once, you're not just praying or working, you're allowed to have fun. Festivals were like the medieval equivalent of a first date, where men and women could mingle, laugh, and maybe even flirt, as long as everyone pretended not to notice. If you're a peasant, you might show off by winning a foot race or catching a greased pig. Nothing says I'm a catch like wrestling livestock with style. If you're noble, you're dropping poetry like it's your job, comparing your crush's eyes to stars or whatever's glowing that day. Dancing was the real MVP of festival romance. The rules were strict, but a quick spin or a whoops, our hands touched moment could say more than any love letter. The maypole dance, basically a giant excuse to flirt while tangled in ribbons. If you're sharing a meat pie or a sip of mead and they don't immediately pass it to their dog, you're golden. But don't get too cocky. Someone's always watching. A parent, a priest, or that one bard who's definitely turning your flirty smile into next week's gossip ballad. For a few hours, though, you can pretend love's not a transaction, that laughter's not suspicious, and that dancing in public won't land you in church confessing your sins. Okay, let's get real for a second. Not everyone's a knight or a noble with time to moon over ribbons. If you're a regular villager waking up with the cows, ankle deep in mud, dreaming of a nap, you're not chasing poetic soulmates. You're looking for someone who can churn butter without a meltdown and maybe doesn't snore like a dying ox. Welcome to peasant courtship, where romance is practical and chemistry means you can both survive a bad harvest. You notice someone because they work hard, don't whine, and have most of their teeth. That's the checklist. You're not picky, you're realistic. How do you show you're interested? You don't write sonnets. You give gifts that actually matter. A basket of eggs, a bundle of kindling, a really nice turnip. If you're feeling bold, maybe a woven bracelet or a spoon you carved while your sheep judged you. You chat during chores, walking to the mill, tending crops, or shoveling something gross. No one's reciting poetry. You're talking about the weather, or whether the blacksmith's new apprentice is a klutz. It's not glamorous, but it's sweet in its own way. You're building a life together, not a fairy tale. If things click, proposals happen fast. Families agree, you say some vows, and boom! You're sharing a hut with your best blanket and their goat. It's not Hollywood, but it's honest. And in a world of mud and hard work, that's enough. So, you've found your person, congrats. Now, it's time to get married, which in medieval terms is less about candlelit vows and more about signing a contract with extra steps. If you're a peasant, it's a big deal, but pretty straightforward. Gather some witnesses, talk to the priest, and try not to mess up the Latin behind the blessings, though it's all business. Yo, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. We're wrapping up our first story in this wild medieval dating series. And let me tell you, it's about to get juicy. We've already covered the basics: arranged marriages, dowries, sneaky festival flirts, and how peasants kept it real with turnip gifts. Tonight, we're diving into the messy side of medieval romance, secret elopements, forbidden love letters, and what happens when your happily ever after feels more like a bad contract. So, grab a cozy blanket, smash that like button if you're hyped, and subscribe if you're loving these historical vibes. Drop a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. It's so cool to see our global crew coming together. All right, let's set the scene, maybe crack a window for that medieval breeze, and jump into the drama of love in the Middle Ages. So, you're head over heels for someone, but there's a problem. They're not the person your family picked out. Maybe you're a noble promised to some lord with a castle and zero personality, but your heart's set on a squire who's got nothing but charm and a decent horse. Or maybe you're a peasant, and your dad's already traded your hand for a cow, but you're sneaking glances at the weaver's kid. Whatever the case, you're done with the rules. You want to marry for love, not livestock. Congrats, you're about to start a medieval scandal. Eloping in the Middle Ages wasn't just running off to Vegas. It was like setting your family's reputation on fire and hoping you don't get burned. Let's say you're Lady Eleanor, betrothed to Sir Boring of Landville, but you're in love with a penniless knight named Thomas. You've been meeting in secret, maybe in a barn or behind the chapel, and you decide to make a break for it. You sneak off to a shady monastery where the abbot owes you a favor. Say some vows with a nervous monk and a stray goat as witnesses, and boom, you're married. Sounds romantic, right? Not so fast. Back home, it's chaos. Your dad's threatening to burn Thomas's village. Your mom's crying into her tapestry. The church is muttering about irregular unions, and the gossip's spreading faster than the plague. If you're Thomas, you're praying. You keep your head, literally. Worst case, you're excommunicated, or worse. Best case, your family grudgingly accepts it to avoid more drama. Either way, you've just rewritten the village newsletter. These elopements were rare, but when they happened, they were legendary. Some couples pulled it off, especially if their marriage was too legit to annul. Others became cautionary tales, sung by bards, as that one time Lady So-and-so ran off and ruined everything. But these stories, passionate, reckless, moonlit vows reminded everyone that love could still punch through the rules, even if it came with a side of family feuds. Okay, let's say running away's not your style, but you still want to tell your crush how you feel. You can't talk in private. Chaperones are lurking like medieval paparazzi. So you go old school. You write a love letter. This isn't a quick you-up text. It's a high-risk, high-reward move. Love letters were the most dangerous parchment since someone scribbled "the king's a jerk" and got caught. You can't just say, "I like you." You've got to go full poet, writing stuff like, "My heart is a falcon soaring in the skies of your mercy." Bonus points if you're literate, which isn't a given. You write it on rough parchment. Maybe sprinkle some dried herbs for flair, and pray it doesn't end up in the wrong hands. The problem, delivery. You can't just hand it over, too risky. You need a middleman, a loyal servant, a bribed nun, or your little brother who doesn't get why this is a big deal. Sometimes a minstrel would sing your letter in code at the market, which is about as subtle as shouting it from a tower. And if your metaphors get too spicy, you're not just risking embarrassment. You're risking a church trial for immoral thoughts. Some letters survived, though passed around like forbidden treasure. They were proof that even in a world of rules and nosy priests, a few words could feel like a revolution. So, you write, you risk it, and you hope your crush doesn't accidentally use your letter to wrap fish. Now, let's talk about what happens when love goes wrong. You're married, yay! But a few months in, you realize your spouse isn't the dream you hoped for. Maybe they snore like a war horn, gamble away your best pig, or just don't get your jokes. Welcome to medieval marital disappointment. Divorce. Nope, not a thing. Marriage was a sacred bond, sealed by God, and a lot of paperwork. To get out, you'd need an annulment. But that's like winning the medieval lottery. You'd have to prove something wild, like you're secretly cousins. One of you was underage. Or the marriage was never consummated, which means swearing that in front of a bishop. Good luck with that. If you're noble, it's even messier. Your marriage isn't just personal. It's a political alliance. Trying to ditch it could spark a feud or tank your family's niche in the court. Most couples just grit their teeth and deal. You sleep in separate beds, sigh dramatically at dinner, and maybe embroider your feelings into a tapestry of regret. Affairs happened. Nobles had secret lovers. Peasants had helpful neighbors, but they were risky. The church was ready to shame you, and the village gossip mill never slept. For women, escaping a bad marriage was brutal. Even if your husband was awful, society expected you to stay quiet, pious, and maybe a little hungry while you waited it out. But some couples found a workaround. Shared struggles, kids, chores. Surviving a bad harvest could build a bond. It wasn't always love, but it was partnership. And in the Middle Ages, that was close enough. You haul firewood together, laugh at a bad storm, and maybe, just maybe, you start to like each other. It's not romantic by our standards, but it's real. All right, let's shift gears. Say your spouse dies maybe from plague, a rogue ox, or a poorly timed goose chase. Now you're widowed, and suddenly, the medieval dating scene's back in play. Widowhood, especially for women, was weirdly freeing. You're not totally independent, but you've got more say than before. You might manage land, make deals, or even talk in public without getting shushed. If you're young and still have most of your teeth, suitors show up fast, like, "Is the funeral over yet?" Fast? A widow with land was basically a medieval jackpot, and guys were ready to propose before the dirt settled. For men, widowhood meant pressure to remarry quick. Who's gonna cook, mend, or wrangle your 6 kids? So you start scoping out the baker's sister, or that widow with the suspiciously good cheese. Second marriages could be sweet. You're older, wiser, and not just chasing a dowry. You pick someone you actually like. Someone who gets your weird habits and doesn't mind your snoring. The church wasn't thrilled if you remarried too fast, and families could squabble over inheritance. But second chances were common. Life was short. Winters were long, and nobody wanted to face them alone. Love in round two wasn't always epic, but it was quiet, steady, and built on knowing you've both seen some stuff. Finally, let's get cosmic. Before you fall too hard, you've gotta ask, is the universe cool with this? In the Middle Ages, love wasn't just about feelings. It was about stars, signs, and whether your aunt saw a weird bird. Astrology was huge. You'd check if your crush's birth chart vibed with yours, or if Venus was acting shady. Birthmarks! They could mean your soulmates or doomed rivals. The church had rules too. You couldn't marry close cousins without a papal hall pass, which rich folks bought like it was nothing. Social status was another hurdle. A noble loving a peasant. That's either a miracle or a tragedy waiting for a bard to sing about it. Omens were everywhere. A crow flies by while you're thinking of them. Bad news? Drop bread at dinner. Cursed match! Someone might slip a charm under your door to ward off bad suitors or hex your chances. Love wasn't just you and your crush. It was the stars, the saints, and that shady lady in the woods, who's definitely not a witch. But despite all the rules, people still loved messy, bold, and against the odds, because medieval or not. Hearts don't care about omens or dowries. They just do what they do. And that's a wrap on Story 1 of our medieval dating saga. We've gone from scandalous elopements to cosmic love checks, with plenty of drama in between. Want to move on to Story 2? Let me know in the comments, and I'll dive into the next tale. Maybe we'll meet a warrior queen, or some nomads with serious game. For now, hit that like button if you're feeling this. Subscribe if you're new, and tell me, what's the wildest love story you've ever heard? Medieval or modern? Drop it below, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace. Hey, what's up? Everyone, welcome back to the channel. We're kicking off a brand new story tonight. And trust me, this one's a banger. Forget knights and dowries. We're diving into the untamed world of ancient nomads, where love, vengeance, and survival collide under an endless sky. Our star, Tomyris, the warrior queen of the Massagetae, a nomadic tribe that roamed the steppes of Central Asia. This isn't a fairy tale, it's a gritty saga of a mother, a leader, and a woman who took on one of history's greatest empires and won. So, grab a drink, hit that like button if you're ready for some epic history, and subscribe if you're loving these deep dives. Drop a comment below. Tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is. I'm always stoked to see our global crew vibing together. All right, let's set the mood. Imagine a crackling campfire under a starry sky. And let's ride into the legend of Tomyris. Picture this, the vast, windswept steppes of Central Asia, around 530 BCE, no cities, no castles, just rolling grasslands, stretching to the horizon. This is the world of the Massage Te, a nomadic people who live by the rhythm of their herds and the strength of their bows. They're not your typical ancient civilization. No marble temples or fancy scrolls. Their homes are yurts. Their wealth is in horses. And their kids learn to shoot arrows before they can tie their shoes. Men and women fight side by side. And leadership isn't handed down like a crown. It's earned through grit, guts, and proving you can keep the tribe alive. Into this world steps Tomyris, a queen who doesn't rule from a throne, but from the saddle. She's not just a leader, she's a force fierce, principled, and the kind of person you don't cross unless you want trouble. Tomyris didn't get to the top by being soft. Her people are tough, raised on harsh winters, long migrations, and enemies lurking on every side. The Massage Te are horse archers, tattooed warriors who move like the wind and hit like a storm. They worship the sun, swear oaths that bind them tighter than chains, and live by a code of loyalty and justice. Steal from the tribe. You're out. Betray your kin. Good luck. Tomyris embodies all of this. She's a warrior, a lawgiver, and a mother who'd do anything for her son. Sparga Pisces. No husband overshadows her. No advisor pulls her strings. She's the real deal, and her people would ride into fire for her. Now, here's where the story gets spicy. Out west, there's a superpower on the rise. The Achaemenid Persian Empire, led by Cyrus the Great. This guy's not just a king, he's a legend. The kind of conqueror who topples empires, like it's a hobby. He's already taken down Lydia and Babylon, and now he's got his eyes on the steppes. The Massage Te are next on his list, and Cyrus thinks he's got this in the bag. After all, who's going to say no to the guy who walked into Babylon like he owned it? Spoiler! Tomyris isn't impressed. Cyrus starts with a diplomatic flex. He sends a message proposing marriage him and Tomyris, tying the knot to unite their people. Sounds romantic. Right. Nope. Tomyris sees through it like it's made of glass. This isn't about love or even an alliance. It's about control. If she says yes, her tribe becomes just another Persian province, and she's reduced to a trophy queen. So she shuts him down. Hard. No wedding bells. No negotiations. Just a polite but firm thanks. But no thanks. Cyrus, who's not used to hearing no, doesn't take it well. If charm won't work, he'll try force. He gathers his army, crosses the Araxes River into Massage Te territory, and sets up camp. Game on. Tomyris isn't sitting around waiting for him to make the next move. She's already rallying her warriors, consulting her chiefs, and prepping for war. This isn't about conquest for her. It's about survival. The Massage Te don't fight for glory or gold. They fight to protect their way of life, their freedom to roam the steppes without answering to anyone. But Cyrus has a trick up his sleeve. He's not just a warrior, he's a strategist. Under his general Harpagus, the Persians set a trap. They leave a camp behind, stocked with wine, food, and all the luxuries nomads rarely see. It's bait, and Tomyris' son, Sparga Pisces, takes it. Sparga Pisces leads a group of warriors to check out the camp. They raid it, grab the supplies, and big mistake, start chugging the wine. Nomads aren't big on booze, so they're not exactly holding their liquor. The Persians swoop back in, catching them drunk and disorganized. It's a slaughter. Sparga Pisces is taken alive, a prisoner in Persian hands. When Tomyris gets the news, it's not just a military loss, it's personal. Her son, her heir, is gone. She sends Cyrus a message, and it's not a polite one. Give me back my son and get out, or I swear by the sun, the master of the Massagute, I'll make you drown in blood. Cyrus doesn't budge. Worse, Sparga Pisces, humiliated by his capture, takes his own life in captivity. Tomyris' world shatters. Her grief isn't quiet. It's a fire, and it's about to burn everything down. This is where Tomyris goes from queen to legend. She doesn't retreat to mourn. She mounts her horse, sharpens her blade, and swears an oath that'll echo through history. Cyrus wants a fight. He's got one. She calls her tribal council, and the Massagete mobilize hundreds of warriors, leather armor gleaming, bows at the ready, faces painted with fury. They don't march like an empire. They move like a storm, fast and unstoppable. Tomyris knows Cyrus's tricks now. She's studied his moves, waited for her moment, and she's ready to turn the tables. The two armies clash in what the Greek historian Herodotus calls one of the bloodiest battles of the ancient world. No fancy formations, no long speeches, just screaming horses, flying arrows, and a queen fighting alongside her people. Tomyris isn't some distant commander. She's in the thick of it, cutting down enemies with a focus that's half skill, half vengeance. When the dust settles, Cyrus the Great is dead. Tomyris finds his body, and she's not here for subtle. She has his head chopped off, stuffs it into a wineskin filled with blood, and says, "You wanted blood. Drink your fill." It's brutal, it's theatrical, and it's a message to every empire that thinks the steppes are an easy target. Now, a quick note. Our main source for this story is Herodotus, a Greek historian who loved a good tale. He wrote this decades after it happened, probably based on rumors and travelers' stories. Did Tomyris really dunk Cyrus's head in blood? Maybe, maybe not. But even if it's half true, it's clear she crushed one of the most powerful men alive and made sure the world remembered her name. The Massagete didn't just win a battle, they stopped an empire in its tracks. The battlefield's quiet now. Cyrus is gone, his army scattered. Tomyris stands over his body, her vengeance complete, but her heart still heavy. Victory doesn't erase the loss of her son. The Massagete don't celebrate like conquerors. They don't carve statues or mint coins. Instead, they return to the steppes, to their herds and their yurts, with a story that'll live longer than any empire. Tomyris doesn't chase power or try to take Persia's throne. That's not her world. She's fought for her people's freedom, avenged her son, and sent a warning to anyone who dare ride east again. This is just the start of her legend. The Massagete fade from history after this. with no tombs or monuments to mark their name. But Tomyris, she lingers, carried by the wind across the steppes, whispered in stories that outlast stone. Her tale's been retold for over 2,000 years by Greeks, Renaissance painters, even modern scholars. Why? Because it's raw, human, and proof that a woman with nothing but fury and a horse can change the world. That's chapter 1 of our Tomyris saga. We've met the queen, seen her face down an empire, and watched her turn grief into vengeance. But there's more to come. How her story shaped the Nomads' world, how it echoed through history, and what it tells us about love, loss, and power. Want me to keep going? Drop a comment and let me know if you're ready for chapter 2. For now, hit that like button if you're feeling this. Subscribe if you're new. And tell me, what's the most epic revenge story you've ever heard? Share it below, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace. Joe, what's good, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. We're diving right back into the epic saga of Tomyris, the warrior queen of the Massage and the wild world of ancient nomads. Last time, we left off with Tomyris standing over the body of Cyrus the Great, her vengeance served and her legend cemented in blood. Tonight, we're zooming out to explore the bigger picture, how her story fits into the nomadic way of life, why it hit so hard, and how it's been retold for centuries. So, grab a snack, hit that like button if you're hyped for more, and subscribe if you're loving these historical deep dives. Drop a comment below. Tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is. It's always dope to see our global crew coming together. All right, let's set the vibe. Imagine you're on a windswept steppe, stars blazing overhead, and let's ride into chapter 2 of Tomyris's tale. So, the dust has settled on the battlefield. Cyrus, the unstoppable Persian king, is dead, his head allegedly dunked in a wineskin of blood by Tomyris herself. The Massage have pulled off the impossible, taking down one of the greatest empires of their time. But here's the thing. Tomyris doesn't act like your typical conqueror. She doesn't march into Persian cities, claim their gold, or slap her name on a throne. Instead, she and her warriors ride back to the steppes, back to their yurts and herds, with nothing but a story to show for it. And that story, it's bigger than any monument. It sends shockwaves across the ancient world, from Babylon to Egypt. The king who toppled empires was brought down by a nomadic queen with no palace, just a horse and a heart full of fury. That's not just a win, it's a statement. To understand why this matters, we've got to get the Massage world. These aren't your standard ancient civilization, folks, building pyramids or writing epic poems on clay tablets. The Massage are nomads, living in what's now Central Asia, east of the Caspian Sea. Their life is all about movement, following their herds, chasing good grazing land, and staying one step ahead of their enemies. Their homes are portable yurts, made of felt and hide, that can be packed up and moved in a day. Their wealth isn't in land or jewels, it's in horses, cattle, and the loyalty of their tribe. Kids learn to ride before they walk. And archery isn't a hobby. It's survival. You don't get a trophy for shooting straight. You get to eat. What makes the Massagite and Tomyris stand out is their culture. Unlike a lot of ancient societies, women aren't stuck in the background. They fight, they ride, they lead. When Tomyris picks up a bow and charges into battle, nobody blinks. Warrior women aren't some rare myth here. They're your neighbors, your sisters, your chiefs. The Massagite value strength and justice over fancy titles. Leaders like Tomyris rise because they prove themselves through courage, smarts, and keeping the tribe tight. Their religion ties it all together. They worship the sun, the master of the Massagite. As Tomyris called it, to them, the sun's not just a light in the sky. It's life, truth, and the judge of every oath. Break your word, and you're not just screwing over your tribe. You're spitting in the face of the heavens. This is the world Tomyris fights for, not a kingdom, but a way of life. When Cyrus comes knocking, he's not just threatening her land, he's threatening her people's freedom to live as they always have, unbound by empires or walls. That's why she doesn't take his marriage proposal or try to negotiate. To her, it's not about power, it's about staying true to who the Massagite are. And when her son Spargapices dies in Persian captivity, it's not just a personal loss. It's a wound to the whole tribe. Her vengeance isn't just for her. It's for every warrior who rides with her. Every kid who'll grow up hearing this story. Speaking of stories, let's talk about how we even know about Tomyris. Our main source is Herodotus, the Greek historian who's basically the ancient world's gossip king. He wrote about Tomyris and Cyrus decades after the fact, probably based on travelers' tales and whatever rumors were floating around Persian markets. Herodotus isn't exactly a fact-checker. He loves a good dramatic twist, and the whole head in a wineskin bit sounds like something he'd spice up for the crowd. But here's the kicker. Even if he stretched the truth, he chose to tell her story. In a world packed with male warlords and kings, he spotlighted a step queen who took down a titan. That's not random. Her story had legs. It was too wild, too human to be ignored. Why did it stick? Because it's got everything. A fierce woman, a tragic son, a cunning enemy, and a bloody showdown. If you're an ancient Greek hearing this from a bard in Athens, you're hooked. It's not just a war story, it's a tragedy, a revenge flick, and a warning to empires all in one. Tomyris becomes larger than life, not because she's got a crown, but because she dared to say no to a superpower and backed it up with arrows. Over time, her tale grows. Medieval writers paint her as a savage Amazon. Renaissance artists love her. She's perfect for a dramatic canvas, standing regal with Cyrus's head in hand. In one 17th century painting, she's calm as a queen, while her warriors dunk his skull in blood. It's extra, but it's unforgettable. But here's the weird part. The Massagite themselves didn't leave a single record. No inscriptions, no statues, no tombs full of gold. Their history was oral, passed down in songs and stories around campfires. Tomyris's legacy survives entirely through outsiders' eyes. Greeks, Persians, later Europeans, and yet it keeps resurfacing. In the 20th century, Central Asian countries like Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan reclaimed her as a hero, a symbol of resistance against empires. Statues of her went up. Her name got taught in schools. She's been in video games, documentaries, even academic papers on women and power. For a queen with no monuments, she's got serious staying power. Why does she endure? Because her story's not just about a battle. It's about what it means to be human. It's a mother losing her son and turning grief into something unstoppable. It's a leader choosing freedom over surrender. It's a woman proving she doesn't need a throne to make history tremble. In a world that often forgets women like her, Tomyris sticks around like a blade in the dirt, waiting for someone new to pick it up. Let's zoom out even further. Tomyris wasn't a one-off. She was part of a long line of women who led with swords and bows. Women history loves to call exceptions, but who were anything but. Before her, there was Shamuramat, an Assyrian queen who might have inspired the myth of Semiramis, building cities and crushing rebels. Around the same time, the Scythians, nomadic cousins of the Massagetae, had women warriors buried with weapons, their bones scarred from real fights. After Tomyris, you get Boudica, the Celtic queen, who torched Roman settlements in the 1st century CE, driven by the same kind of personal loss. Then there's Zenobia of Palmyra, who flipped off Rome in the 3rd century and carved out her own empire. These women weren't anomalies. They were part of a pattern. They led in times when men thought leadership was their birthright. And they won because they were smart, fierce, and didn't wait for permission. What ties them together is audacity. They didn't just rule, they rewrote the rules. And while male conquerors got statues, these women were often labeled savage or unnatural. Why? Because they scared the pants off empires. Tomyris' story, preserved by Greek pens and modern imaginations, reminds us that women like her weren't rare. They were just rarely written down. When you think of ancient wars, don't just picture bearded guys in helmets. Picture a queen on horseback, bow drawn, ready to make history bleed. Back to the steppes. The Massagetae's world wasn't just about fighting, it was about living free. Nomads like them didn't need cities to thrive. They had the wind, the grass, and a bond tighter than any empire's laws. Their society was built on movement, loyalty, and survival. Property was shared. Crimes were judged harshly but fairly, and leadership was earned, not inherited. Unlike Persia's bureaucracy or Babylon's walls, the Massagetae had something else: adaptability. They could vanish into the steppes, strike like lightning, and be gone before you knew what hit you. That's what made them so hard to conquer, and why Tomyris' victory wasn't just a fluke. Her story's also a love story, in a way. Not the mushy kind, but love for her son, her people, her freedom. When she swore to make Cyrus drink his fill of blood, it wasn't just rage. It was a promise to protect what mattered most. That's what makes her human, not just a myth. She's a mother who'd burn the world for her kid, a leader who'd die for her tribe, and a woman who'd rather fight then kneel. And that's why, even without a single statue, her name still rides across the steps. That's Chapter 2 of our Tomyris saga. We've dug into her world, her people, and why her stories echoed for millennia. But there's more to come, how nomads shaped history, how their love stories and traditions survived, and what Tomyris's legacy means today. Want me to keep going? Drop a comment and let me know if you're ready for Chapter 3. For now, smash that like button. If you're vibing, subscribe. If you're new, and tell me what's a story from your culture that's stuck around like Tomyris's. Share it below, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace. Joe, what's good? Everyone, welcome back to the channel. We're wrapping up our second story about Tomyris, the badass queen of the Massageté, and the untamed world of ancient nomads. Last time, we dug into how her epic showdown with Cyrus the Great became a legend, why her nomadic culture was so fierce, and how her story's been remixed for centuries. Tonight, we're going full circle exploring the bigger world of nomads, their love stories, their legacy, and what Tomyris's tale means in the grand scheme of history. So, grab a cozy drink, smash that like button if you're ready for the finale, and subscribe if you're vibing with these historical deep dives. Drop a comment below, tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is. I love seeing our global crew connect. All right, let's set the scene picture. A starry steppe night, the wind whispering stories, and let's dive into Chapter 3 of Tomyris's saga. So, Tomyris rides off into history after her victory over Cyrus, her name carried by the wind across the steppes. No statues, no tombs, just a story that refuses to die. But to really get her, we've got to understand the nomadic world. She came from a world of freedom, grit, and a love that's as practical as it is fierce. Nomads like the Massageté didn't live by the rules of empires. Their homes were yurts, their roads were grass, and their niche was survival. They moved with the seasons, following herds of horses, sheep, and cattle. Horses weren't just transport, they were life, your wealth, your status, your chance to outrun trouble, all tied to how many hooves you had galloping beside you. Unlike city dwellers with their kings and taxes, nomads had a different vibe. Power came from clans and tribes, with leaders like Tomyris earning their spot through charisma, courage, and keeping everyone fed. Loyalty wasn't to a crown, it was to your kin, sealed around campfires and proven in battle. Their laws and history, not written in stone, but sung by elders, woven into poems, and passed down like treasure. A single bard could carry a tribe's entire identity in their head. Every feud, every hero, every oath. That's how Tomyris's story survived. Not through scrolls, but through breath and memory. Love in this world, it's not the stuff of courtly poems, but it's real. Nomads didn't have time for flowery nonsense. You married to survive, to strengthen the tribe, to make sure someone's got your back when wolves or raiders show up. Let's say you're a Massageté warrior. You spot someone who can ride hard, shoots straight, and doesn't flinch at a snowstorm. That's your type. Courtship's practical. You share a hunt, trade a carved bone trinket, or maybe just nod at each other while skinning a deer. No chaperones, no dowries, just two people proving they can handle life together. Marriage is quick, a vow under the sun. Maybe a feast with roasted meat and fermented mare's milk. You set up a yurt, pool your herds, and boom, you're a team. Love grows from trust, not sonnets. But don't think it's all cold pragmatism. Nomads felt deeply. A warrior might tattoo their partner's name on their arm, a mark of loyalty that lasts beyond death. Or they'd swear oaths by the sun, promising to ride together through any storm. When Tomyris lost her son, Spargapizes, that grief wasn't just personal. It was a wound to the tribe. Her vengeance for him was love in its rawest form, a mother's promise to make things right. Nomadic love wasn't about grand gestures. It was about showing up, fighting together, and keeping the fire lit through the darkest nights. Now, let's talk about how nomads like the Massage Tay shaped the world. Empires saw them as barbarians, but nomads were the glue holding ancient trade routes together. They carried silk from China, spices from India, and silver from Persia across the steppes and deserts. The Silk Road. That wasn't just a path. It was a network of nomadic caravans, armed and ready to roll. They'd trade furs, horses, or even news, connecting worlds that barely knew each other. But cross them, and they'd raid your town faster than you could blink. The Massagite, like their Scythian cousins, were masters of this dance trade one day, strike the next. It wasn't betrayal, it was business. Take the Scythians, who ruled the steppes before Tomyris. They sold grain to Greek cities by the Black Sea, but burned those same cities if the deal went sour. Their women fought two graves. Show female warriors with battle-scarred bones and swords by their side. Or look at the Bedouin of the Arabian deserts. They guided spice caravans across dunes. But if you didn't pay their fee, your camels were theirs. Later, the Mongols took it to another level, building the biggest land empire ever by turning nomadic speed into a weapon. They didn't just conquer, they connected China to Europe, moving ideas, goods, and even the plague. Nomads weren't chaos. They were the pulse of the ancient world. What's wild is how nomads did all this without leaving much behind. No pyramids, no libraries, just burial mounds, gold, trinkets, and stories. Their art, full of swirling animals and predators, screams freedom and motion. Their spirituality was just as fluid. The Massagite worshipped the sun, but others, like the Mongols, prayed to the sky, god Tengri, or spoke to spirits in rivers and mountains. Shamans, often women, were their healers and guides, reading omens in the stars or smoke. When empires met nomads, they'd adopt bits of their faith, blending it with Buddhism, Islam, or Christianity. Nomads didn't need temples. Their gods rode with them. Tomyris' story fits right into this. Her victory over Cyrus wasn't just a one-off. It was a nomadic flex, proof that mobility and heart could outmatch an empire's walls. But her legacy's bigger than one battle. She's a symbol of defiance, popping up whenever someone needs a reminder that power doesn't need a throne. In Renaissance Europe, she was painted as a noble savage, a warning to cocky kings. In modern Central Asia, she's a folk hero, with statues in Kazakhstan, and kids learning her name in school. She's been in games, books, even philosophical debates about whether women can rule without losing their feminine grace. Spoiler! Tomyris didn't care about that noise. Her story's also a love letter to the Nomads' way of life. It's about a queen who fought for freedom, not fame, a mother who turned loss into a reckoning, a woman who didn't need a crown to make empires shake. History often forgets nomads. They don't leave ruins for us to gawk at, but they left something else, a spirit of resilience, a knack for bending the world without breaking themselves. The Scythians faded, the Bedouins settled, the Mongols scattered, but their DNA's in our languages, our trade routes, even our love for a good story told over a fire. Today, nomads still exist, though they're fewer, squeezed by borders, climate change, and cities creeping into their lands. But their descendants carry traditions older than most nations: hospitality to strangers, respect for the earth, stories that gallop through time. Tomyris's legacy lives in them, and in anyone who chooses freedom over chains. She reminds us that history isn't just kings and walls. It's the people who ride between them, leaving only hoofprints and legends. So, what's the takeaway? Tomyris didn't just win a war. She proved you don't need a palace to matter. Her love for her son, her people, her way of life was her weapon. And her story, carried by nomads' voices and outsiders' pens, still whispers, "Come for me, and you'll regret it." In a world that loves monuments, she's a reminder that the wind can outlast stone. That's a wrap on Story 2 of our nomadic saga. We've followed Tomyris from vengeance to legend, and seen how nomads shaped history with love, loyalty, and a killer aim. Ready for Story 3? Let me know in the comments if you want to dive into the next tale. Maybe we'll hit the railroads or another epic. For now, hit that like button if you're feeling this, subscribe if you're new, and tell me what's a tradition from your family or culture that's lasted like a nomad's story. Drop it below, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace. Joe, what's good? Everyone, welcome back to the channel. We're kicking off a brand new story tonight, and it's a wild ride through one of the most epic chapters in American history, the Transcontinental Railroad. Forget knights or nomads. This is about iron, steam, and a nation trying to stitch itself together across 700 miles of wilderness. It's a story of ambition, sweat, and sacrifice, with a cast of workers, dreamers, and indigenous nations caught in the crossfire. So, grab a snack, hit that like button if you're ready for some gritty history, and subscribe if you're loving these deep dives. Drop a comment below. Tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is. It's always dope to see our global crew vibing together. All right, let's set the mood. Imagine the clank of steel and the whistle of a train. And let's roll into Chapter 1 of this railroad saga. Picture America in the mid-1800s. The East is buzzing with factories, ports, and cities. The West, it's a vast, untamed frontier mountains, deserts, gold fields, and dreams of a better life. But connecting the two, that's a nightmare. If you want to get from New York to California, you've got two options. Sail around South America for months, dodging storms and scurvy, or trek across the continent in a wagon, risking bandits, disease, and starvation. Either way, it's a gamble. But there's a vision floating around a railroad, coast to coast, that could shrink the country from months to days. It's a crazy idea, but some folks think it's the key to uniting a fractured nation, speeding up trade, moving armies, and settling the West. Problem is, it's gonna take more than dreams. It needs money, muscle, and a whole lot of political will. Enter 1862, right in the middle of the Civil War. The country's tearing itself apart. But President Abraham Lincoln still signs the Pacific Railway Act. This law greenlights two companies to make the dream real. The Union Pacific, starting in Omaha, Nebraska, and heading west, and the Central Pacific, starting in Sacramento, California, and pushing east. They'll meet somewhere in the middle, and the government's throwing in serious incentives, huge land grants, up to 640 acres per mile of track, plus juicy loans. It's not just a construction project. It's a race for land, cash, and glory. On paper, it's a marvel of engineering. In reality, it's about to be one of the toughest, grittiest builds in history, with workers blasting through mountains, crossing deserts, and facing winters that'd freeze your soul. Let's start with the Central Pacific. They've got the harder job right out the gate. The Sierra Nevada mountains. These aren't cute hills. They're massive granite peaks, prone to avalanches and snowdrifts that could bury a house. Construction kicks off in Sacramento in 1863, but just 80 miles east. They hit a wall, literally. The Sierras are a beast, and dynamite hasn't even been invented yet. Every mile feels like a war against nature, with workers chiseling through rock by hand and praying they don't get crushed. To pull this off, the Central Pacific needs bodies, lots of them. At first, they hire Irish immigrants and white laborers, but the conditions are brutal, and a lot of them bounce. That's when they turn to Chinese immigrants. And let me tell you, these guys become the backbone of the whole operation. By 1865, over 10 Zhuo Chinese workers, mostly from Guangdong province, are building the railroad, making up 80% of the Central Pacific's crew. They're paid less than white workers, stuck in worse camps, and face straight-up racism daily. But they're absolute legends. Skill, tough, and disciplined. They carve tunnels through solid rock with hand tools and black powder. A mix so sketchy, it could blow up in your face. The infamous Tunnel Number 6 took nearly 2 years, with workers living in snow-buried camps, climbing out through chimney-like shafts just to breathe. Dozens in explosions, avalanches, and rock slides. To speed things up, Chinese crews dangled in baskets over cliffs, chipping away at stone inch by inch. Can't go around a mountain. They blast through it. Can't level the ground. They build wooden trestles that soar over ravines like something out of a fever dream. It's heroic, dangerous, and barely appreciated at the time. By 1867, the Central Pacific finally breaks through the Sierras. Ahead lies the Nevada desert, hot, dry, and deadly, but flat. The worst is behind them, and the race to meet the Union Pacific is on. Meanwhile, the Union Pacific's got its own challenges. Starting in Omaha, they're laying track across the Great Plains wide, open and deceptively easy. But the real fight isn't the land. It's people and politics. Their workforce is mostly Irish immigrants, former Union soldiers, and freed African Americans, many fresh off the Civil War and looking for a paycheck. These guys can lay 2, sometimes 3 miles of track a day, hammering spikes and hauling rails like machines. But the plains aren't empty. They're home to indigenous nations like the Pawnee, Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Lakota Sioux. And they're not rolling out the welcome mat. For these tribes, the railroad's not progress. It's an invasion. The tracks slice through their hunting grounds, scaring off buffalo herds they rely on for food, clothing, and spirituality. Telegraph poles and surveyors mess with sacred spaces, and the trains bring settlers, soldiers, and fences. The Lakota, led by chiefs like Red Cloud, fight back hard, raiding camps, attacking survey teams, and ripping up rails. It's not just skirmishes, it's a low-grade war. The U.S. government responds by building forts along the route and sending troops to guard the workers. Track-laying becomes a military op, with crews working under armed escorts. For the tribes, it's clear what's coming. Displacement, broken treaties, and the end of their way of life. They're not wrong. Still, the Union Pacific pushes west, fueled by federal loans and led by shady financiers like Thomas Durant, who's more into stock schemes than actual engineering. Their crews live in hell on wheels, towns, temporary camps that pop up overnight, full of whiskey, gambling, and fights, then vanish when the tracks move on. By 1867, they hit Cheyenne, Wyoming, with the Rocky Mountains looming ahead. The Sierras might be brutal, but the plains have their own kind of hell raids, storms, and the weight of building over someone else's home. This isn't just a story of steel and steam, it's a human story. The Chinese workers on the Central Pacific, they're not just laborers, they're immigrants chasing a better life, enduring frostbite and prejudice to send money home. The Irish and freedmen on the Union Pacific, they're survivors of famine, and slavery, betting on backbreaking work for a shot at something better. And the indigenous nations, they're fighting for their survival, their culture, their everything. The railroad's a symbol of unity for some, but for others, it's a scar across their world. The race is heating up. The Central Pacific and Union Pacific are barreling toward each other, driven by greed, pride, and the promise of land grants. Every mile of track means more money, more power, but the cost, It's paid in sweat, blood, and lives mostly by people whose names never made it into the history books. This isn't just a railroad. It's a collision of dreams, cultures, and destinies, and it's about to change America forever. That's Chapter 1 of our Transcontinental Railroad saga. We've set the stage with the Central Pacific's battle against the Sierras, the Union Pacific's push across the plains, and the human stakes for workers and indigenous nations. But there's more to come. The race gets crazier, the sacrifices get heavier, and the finish line's closer than anyone expects. Want me to keep going? Drop a comment and let me know if you're ready for Chapter 2. For now, hit that like button if you're feeling this. Subscribe if you're new. And tell me, what's the biggest challenge you faced to connect two parts of your life? Share it below, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace. Yo, what's good, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. We're diving right back into the epic saga of the Transcontinental Railroad, the iron spine that stitched America together in the 1860s. Last time, we kicked things off with the Central Pacific, battling the Sierra Nevada mountains, the Union Pacific pushing across the Great Plains, and the human-cost Chinese and Irish workers breaking their backs, indigenous nations fighting for their way of life. Tonight, we're cranking up the intensity as the race between these two companies gets wild. The stakes get higher, and the finish line starts coming into view. So, grab a drink, hit that like button if you're hyped, and subscribe if you're loving these historical deep dives. Drop a comment below. Tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is. It's always dope to see our global crew coming together. All right, let's set the vibe. Imagine the rumble of a locomotive and the clang of steel. And let's roll into Chapter 2 of this railroad saga. So, it's the late 1860s, and the Central Pacific and Union Pacific are locked in a full-on sprint to lay as much track as possible. Why the rush? Because the government's paying big land grants and loans for every mile of track, which means more track equals more money, more land, more power. This isn't just a construction project anymore. It's a high-stakes race for the bag, and both sides are playing dirty. They're laying tracks so fast, they're sometimes building parallel lines, knowing only one will get used. It's wasteful, it's chaotic, and it's peak 19th century capitalism. But let's break it down and see what each side's dealing with as they barrel toward that fated meeting point in the Utah desert. Starting with the Central Pacific, they've just clawed their way out of the Sierra Nevada mountains, a brutal gauntlet of granite, snow, and explosions that tested their mostly Chinese workforce to the limit. By 1867, they're hitting the Nevada desert, which is a different kind of hell. It's flat, sure, but it's scorching hot, bone dry, and so remote that supplies have to be hauled in from California or even China. Water's so scarce, they're shipping it by wagon, and workers are dropping from heat stroke and dehydration. The Chinese crews, though, they're absolute machines. They've honed their system, organized teams, rotating shifts, and a rhythm that's almost like a dance. They lay track with precision, building trestles over dry riverbeds, and cutting through sagebrush like it's nothing. These guys aren't just workers, they're the unsung heroes of the railroad. Around 15 zero-euro Chinese immigrants, mostly young men from Guangdong, are out here risking everything. They're paid less than white workers sometimes, as little as $25 a month, compared to $35 for others. And they're stuck in rough camps with little protection from the elements. Racism's rampant. They're called slurs, mocked as weak, but they shut that noise down with their work. They cook their own food, often staying healthier than their counterparts who rely on spoiled meat and whiskey. They're blasting through rock, laying rails, and keeping the Central Pacific's dream alive. But their niche in history, it's barely acknowledged at the time. No statues, no speeches, just calloused hands and a quiet grind. Meanwhile, the Union Pacific's charging west from Omaha, and they've got their own mess to deal with. The Great Plains are behind them, and they're hitting Wyoming's tougher terrain rivers to bridge, hills to cut through, and the Rocky Mountains looming on the horizon. Their workforce is a mix of Irish immigrants, Civil War vets, and freed African Americans, all chasing a paycheck in a world that's not exactly kind to them. These guys can lay track fast 2 or 3 miles a day when things are clicking, but they're working in a war zone. Indigenous tribes like the Lakota Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho are fighting back against the railroad. And it's not hard to see why. The tracks are tearing through their hunting grounds, wiping out buffalo herds that are their lifeline food. Clothing, tools, everything. The Union Pacific's steam engines and telegraph poles are like a middle finger to sacred lands, and settlers trailing the rails bring fences and disease. The Lakota, under leaders like Red Cloud, hit hard raiding work camps, derailing supply trains, and making it clear this is their home. The U.S. Army steps in, building forts and sending soldiers to guard the crews. It's a grim cycle. Workers lay track, tribes strike back, troops crack down. For the indigenous nations, the railroad's not just a train, it's the end of a world. Every spike driven is another nail in their way of life. The Union Pacific's also got internal drama. Their boss, Thomas Durant, is less an engineer and more a Wall Street hustler. He's cooking the books, skimming profits through shady deals like the Credit Mobilier scandal, where he overcharges the government and pockets the difference. The workers, they're living in hell on wheels camps, temporary towns that are basically Wild West chaos. Think saloons, fistfights, and gambling dens that vanish when the tracks move on. Whiskey flows, morale's shaky, and labor strikes pop off when pay gets delayed. Still, the Irish crews keep hammering, driven by dreams of a better life or just the need to eat. Both companies are pushing their workers to the brink. In April 1869, the Central Pacific's Chinese crews set a world record 10 miles of track laid in a single day. 10 miles. That's a feat of raw endurance and teamwork, with men hauling rails, spiking ties, and moving earth like a human conveyor belt. The Union Pacific tries to keep up, but they're hitting snags, supply shortages, bad weather, and Durant's mismanagement, both sides know the finish line's close, somewhere in Utah. And they're not slowing down. They're even laying track past each other, claiming land they don't need, just to cash in on those government grants. It's absurd, but it's the game. Let's talk about the workers a bit more, because they're the heart of this story. The Chinese on the Central Pacific. They're not just building a railroad. They're building a future, sending money back to families across the Pacific. Many came to America fleeing poverty or war, hoping the Gold Mountain hype was real. Instead, they get freezing tunnels, deadly blasts, and bosses who barely see them as human. Yet they stick it out, proving skeptics wrong and becoming the Central Pacific's secret weapon. On the Union Pacific, the Irish workers are fresh off famine and war, carrying their own scars. They're tough, scrappy, and used to hard knocks, but they're also dying from raids, accidents, and disease. Freed African Americans, some just out of slavery, join the crews too, chasing freedom's promise, but finding more exploitation. These men aren't executives or tycoons. They're the muscle and soul of the railroad, and their names are barely recorded. Then there's the indigenous perspective. For tribes like the Lakota or Shoshone, the railroad's a death sentence. Buffalo herds, once millions strong, are being slaughtered sometimes for food, sometimes just for sport, by train passengers. Sacred sites are trampled, hunting patterns disrupted. The rails bring settlers who claim land under government handouts, backed by soldiers ready to enforce it. Resistance, like Red Cloud's war, slows the railroad but can't stop it. The tribes know what's coming. Reservations, broken promises, and a life caged by borders. Their fight isn't just about land, it's about identity, culture, and survival. As the tracks creep closer, the tension's electric. Surveyors are scouting the meeting point at Promontory Summit, Utah. Plans are in motion for a big ceremony, golden spikes. Speeches, the works, the Central Pacific's locomotive, Jupiter, and the Union Pacific's number 119 are prepped to go nose to nose. Telegraph wires are hooked up to broadcast the final hammer blows nationwide. It's gonna be a moment for the history books, a symbol of a nation pulling itself together after the Civil War. But behind the pomp, there's a darker truth. This railroad's built on exploited labor, stolen land, and a frenzy for profit that didn't care who got crushed. The finish line's in sight, but the scars it's leaving will last generations. That's Chapter 2 of our Transcontinental Railroad saga. We've seen the race heat up, the workers pushed to their limits, and the indigenous nations fighting a losing battle. But the story's not over. The final spike's coming, and with it, a new America. Want me to keep going? Drop a comment and let me know if you're ready for Chapter 3. For now, smash that like button if you're feeling this. Subscribe if you're new, and tell me, what's a time you worked crazy hard for something bigger than yourself? Share it below, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace. Yo, what's good, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. We're wrapping up our epic saga of the Transcontinental Railroad, the steel lifeline that changed America forever. Last time, we dove into the frantic race between the Central Pacific and Union Pacific, with Chinese and Irish workers pushing through deserts and plains, indigenous nations fighting for their survival, and corporate greed driving it all. Tonight, we're hitting the finish line the moment the tracks meet, the legacy it leaves, and the love, loss, and transformation baked into every mile. So, grab a cozy drink, smash that like button if you're ready for the finale, and subscribe if you're vibing with these historical deep dives. Drop a comment below. Tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is. I'm stoked to see our global crew together. All right, let's set the scene. Hear the whistle of a steam engine and the cheer of a crowd, and roll into Chapter 3 of this railroad saga. It's May 10th, 1869, and Promontory Summit, Utah, is the center of the universe. The Central Pacific and Union Pacific have been racing toward each other for years, laying over 700 miles of track through mountains, deserts, and indigenous lands. Now, they're face to face. Their locomotives, Central Pacific's Jupiter and Union Pacific's number 119, nose to nose, like boxers before a fight. A crowd's gathered. Workers, executives, journalists, and a few locals braving the dusty plains. The air's electric with anticipation. This isn't just a construction job done. It's a nation reborn, stitched together by iron and steam. A golden spike, engraved with "May God continue the unity of our country," sits ready to seal the deal. Telegraph wires are hooked up to send the final hammer blows across America in real time. Leland Stanford, big shot of the Central Pacific, grabs the sledgehammer. Everyone's holding their breath. New York, San Francisco, even small towns are glued to telegraph offices. He swings, the hammer hits, and the telegraph clicks. Done! Church bells ring, cannons boom. Crowds erupt from coast to coast. In 7 years, the impossible's been done. What continues to take 6 months by wagon or ship now takes 7 days by rail. The United States isn't just a map anymore. It's a living, breathing nation, connected by steel. It's a post-Civil War flex. Proof America can heal its fractures and step into the industrial big leagues. But let's pull back the curtain, because the shiny moment at Promontory hides some gritty truths. First off, who's missing from this picture? The Chinese workers, 15, 0 of them, who carved through the Sierra Nevada, blasted tunnels, and set world records laying track. They're not invited to the photo op. No Chinese faces in the iconic shot of men in suits holding cigars. The Irish workers freed African Americans and others who hauled rails for the Union Pacific. Also nowhere to be seen. The ceremony's all about the tycoons, Stanford, Durant, Huntington posing like they swung the hammers themselves. The real heroes, the ones with calloused hands and unmarked graves, are sidelined. It's a gut punch, but it's the story of the railroad. Unity for some, erasure for others. What does this railroad mean For starters, it's an economic earthquake. Overnight, America's not two coasts separated by wilderness. It's one market. Wheat from the Midwest hits California mining towns in days. Factory goods from New York flow west. Rail cars replace oxen. Steam outpaces sails. Towns sprout along the tracks. Some become cities like Denver. Others fade when the rails shift. The railroad fuels the second industrial revolution. With steel mills, coal mines, and timber yards booming to keep up, jobs multiply. From blacksmiths to brakemen, tycoons get filthy rich, bankers cash in, and entrepreneurs open saloons and stores along the line. Mail zips faster, news crosses time zones, and the government can flex its muscle nationwide, sending troops or supplies wherever the rails go. People move, too. Immigrants from Europe, once stuck in East Coast slums, now see a path to California or Oregon. Homesteaders, prospectors, and even outlaws ride the rails west, chasing land or luck. The railroad makes manifest destiny feel real. The idea that America's meant to span ocean to ocean. The frontier's not wild anymore. It's reachable, claimable. Time zones are born to sync train schedules, changing how the country ticks. Farmers ship crops cross-country. Factories churn out goods for new markets. The rhythm of America starts matching the clatter of trains. It's not just a railroad, it's the engine of a continental power. But every spike driven has a cost. And for indigenous nations, it's catastrophic. The Lakota Sioux, Cheyenne, Shoshone, and others see their worlds sliced apart. Buffalo herds, once tens of millions strong, are slaughtered, some for food, others gunned down for sport from train windows. By the 1880s, they're nearly extinct, gutting the tribe's food, culture, and spirit. The rails bring settlers who claim land under laws like the Homestead Act, backed by soldiers in new forts. Sacred sites are bulldozed, hunting grounds fenced off. Resistance like Red Cloud's War or later, the Battle of Little Bighorn slows the tide, but can't stop it. Tribes are forced onto reservations, far from their homelands, their nomadic lives caged by borders. The railroads hailed as progress, but for them, it's erasure, a steel scar across their history. Love ties into this, too, not the romantic kind, but the deep, gritty kind. The workers' love for their families drives them. Chinese laborers send wages back to villages in Guangdong, dreaming of a better life. Irish immigrants, scarred by famine, hammer spikes to feed their kids. Freedmen, fresh from slavery, work for a freedom that's still out of reach. For indigenous nations, it's love for their land, their